We're going to apply an all-purpose zipper into our garment using the center lapped application. So the center lapped application means that when the zipper is in, I have equal amounts of fabric that are on each side of the zipper with the opening going down the middle of the zipper teeth. A center lapped zipper application is going to have 2 rows of parallel stitching that can be seen on the right side of the garment that is actually stitching the zipper into the garment. To put in a center lapped zipper, you're going to need a 7-inch all-purpose zipper. You're going to need zipper pattern piece number 34. You're going to need your hem gauge, and you're going to need your zipper foot. Each machine zipper foot may be slightly different, but the zipper foot is designed with a pressure point in the center that applies pressure to the zipper tape, but it has a cutout that allows you to put the needle on either the left or the right side of the pressure plate so that you can get the needle close to the zipper feet when sewing in the zipper. To do the center lap zipper, we are going to take our 2 pieces of fabric and we are going to place them right sides together. So you're going to place one right side up, you're going to lay the other one right side down so that the wrong sides are out, lining up the long edge of our fabrics together. So we're going to stitch down the long edge side. This would be where your zipper is actually going in. So your side seam, your center back would be most common. You may be going down the front of that. To do this, we are going to lay our zipper on our fabric with the top of the zipper tape lining up with the top edge of our fabric, and we're going to place a pin in our fabric where our bottom stop is on our zipper. Okay. Then we are going to pin our fabric in place. Alright, and now we're ready to actually stitch our fabric together to simulate our garment that we're putting our zipper in. To prepare our fabric for the zipper, we're going to make our seam where our zipper is going to be placed into the garment. So we're going to line up the edge of our fabric at the 5/8 inch mark on our sewing machine. This is the regular size or the standard depth for a seam allowance for sewing a garment. We're going to line it up. We're going to start at the top of the fabric and we're going to use a basting stitch. We're going to baste down to the pin where we measured the bottom stop of the zipper. When we get to that pin, we're going to stitch past it a couple stitches. Then we're going to change to a regular stitch length from our basting stitch. We're going to back stitch and then we're going to stitch down the remainder of the fabric. Okay, so remember to put it on basting stitch. That's the largest stitch that you have. We are not going to back stitch at the beginning because when we baste, we do not back stitch. Basting is temporary stitching that we're going to use for our sewing. So we're basting down at 5/8 of an inch until we get to the pin that we placed in our fabric, marking the bottom of our zipper stop. So we're going to stitch just slightly past that pin, a couple stitches. Now we're going to switch back to a regular stitch length. So put your machine on the regular stitch length and we're going to back stitch back to that pin. Okay, and then we're going to go forward and sew down the rest of the fabric. To the end. The basting portion that we just sewed in is where the zipper will actually be placed into the garment, and so we will need to be able to open that up after we're done stitching the zipper in, which is why we basted that in. When you get to the end, do a back stitch, and then you can remove your fabric from the machine. Once we have stitched the seam in, now we need to actually open that seam up and press it flat on, and get a nice smooth seam. So after you've pressed that, if this was your actual garment, you would need to actually put a seam finish on your seam allowances before you sew your zipper in, so that you keep your seam allowances from raveling during laundering and wear of the garment. We have our seam pressed open, and we have the basting stitch at the top and then our regular stitch at the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold our fabric, our pattern, so that we only have the one layer of seam allowance. The rest of the garment is over to the other side, so the 2 layers of the garment and the other seam allowance. Now we want to take our zipper. We're going to open our zipper, so unzip your zipper, and we're going to turn the zipper right side down. So when the zipper is right side down, you're not going to see the zipper pull. The zipper pull needs to be next to the fabric. We're going to line the zipper up so that the top of the zipper tape is at the top of our garment, and the zipper teeth are laying next to the seam of the garment that we just made. So I'm placing this so that the zipper tape is at the top and the zipper teeth are lying next to the seam that we just sewed into the garment with the basting stitch. We want to pin that in place. And we're going to pin all the way down to the bottom of the zipper tape. To sew the zipper, the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to take off our regular presser foot, and we're going to need to put on our zipper foot. Most zipper foots look like this one. They actually have a center piece that comes out, and the needle can either go on the left or the right of that center piece, which applies pressure to the zipper tape. Mine is a little bit different in that I have 2 large openings and 2 small presser feet areas on the outside, as well as a pressure point in the middle. The purpose of the zipper foot is so that when you put the zipper foot on the machine, it allows you to line up the zipper foot so that you can get the needle close to the zipper. So when your zipper foot is put on, it's going to go zipper foot, needle, zipper, teeth, okay? And you can slide this to either side depending upon which side of the zipper that you are working on to do the stitching, so that you get zipper foot, needle, zipper teeth. So to take your zipper foot off, to apply your zipper foot, most machines you just press down on your presser foot, or there is a release button on the back of your shaft that you push on, and it will allow your foot to drop off. Then you can place your zipper foot onto your machine. You're going to line up your zipper foot depending upon which side of the zipper that you're working on. So you remember, you want zipper foot, teeth, zipper. So I want the majority of my foot to the left side because I'm working on the left side of the zipper. So I'm going to slide that. I'm going to place it under my shaft that's coming down, and you lower your presser foot, and when you have it lined up, it should click in and snap onto your shaft so that your zipper foot is on there. Then you're going to sew, and this is just a temporary stitch. This is not our final stitch to sew our zipper in. So at this point, we can sew anywhere in the zipper tape that we like. You're going to sew with a regular stitch length, and you're going to back stitch as you sew. So you're going to start at the top of the zipper. You're going to back stitch, and then you're going to be a stitch down. Now with a zipper foot, it does not sew over pins. So you are going to have to remove the pins as you sew your zipper in. Again, we're just sewing through the one seam allowance, removing pins as we get to them. Keeping the zipper teeth next to our original seam that we sewed in. When you get to the end of the zipper tape, you can back stitch. And then remove your fabric from the machine. So we have our zipper sewn through our one seam allowance. Now we are ready to zip the zipper closed, and we're going to flip it over, and now we're going to work from the right side of the garment. So when you flip it over, you want to make sure that your zipper teeth are lined up underneath your seam. So you can feel those zipper teeth, the ridge that's underneath your seam there. You want to make sure that's in the middle, and then you're just going to place some pins through the seam allowances to hold the zipper in place. We're going to put those on both sides. Of our fabric. So now that we have our zipper held in place, we're ready to actually mark where we're going to stitch. So we want to have two seams that are going to show in our zipper. So we're going to sew down the zipper. When we get to the bottom, we're going to pivot, we're going to turn across the bottom, and then we're going to pivot and we're going to sew back up. We want these seams that are going to be 3/8 of an inch from this original seam that we sewed. So we're going to take our hem gauge, we're going to set our hem gauge at 3/8 of an inch, and then we're going to place that on that seam, and we're going to mark those. The best way to mark that is with a marking pen. So marking pens are like tracing paper, but they're a pen, and they can have disappearing ink, which means that when you use this disappearing ink, the ink is going to disappear usually within 24 hours as it begins to interact with the air. The other option you have is what they call Mark Be Gone. This is a mark that will not disappear with the air, but will disappear when you launder the garment. So this Mark Be Gone should wash out of the garment when you launder it. The disappearing ink will disappear within 24 hours usually as it interacts with the air. If you don't have a marking pen, you can mark very lightly with a pencil your marks. So We're going to line our seam gauge up with the 3/8 at the seam, and we're going to make some marks all the way down our zipper. These marks will now become our guides for where we're going to sew. So I'm going to mark those down. When you get to the bottom, you can feel where that zipper stop is, and that's where you're going to stop. You're going to stop just past the zipper stop, so you're going to sew below the zipper stop. So I'm going to mark all the way down to the zipper stop. Okay. And then I'm going to mark on the other side as well. Make sure I can see my marks. So I have these little purple marks at 3/8 of an inch out from the seam, and those are going to become my stitching lines. To stitch the zipper in, I'm going to start at the top of the zipper, and I am going to stitch down one side. When I get to the bottom stop, I'm going to pivot, stitch across the zipper, and then pivot and stitch back up. To start, we want to use a regular stitch length, and it does not matter if you start on the left side or the right side of the zipper. It just, whichever side you choose to start on, your zipper foot needs to be zipper foot, needle, and then zipper. So since my zipper foot is set to start on the left side, I'm going to actually start on the left side. I'm going to line my needle up with my marks that I made at 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to back stitch. Stitching with a regular stitch length, and then I'm going to stitch down. And remember that zipper feet do not like to sew over pins, so I'm going to remove those pins as I come to them. And I'm going to keep my needle lined up with the marks that I made at 3/8 of an inch, so that I keep a very nice straight seam on the outside of my garment where the zipper is sewn in. Alright, so I've come to the pin that marks the bottom of my zipper where the zipper stop is, so I'm going to leave my needle down. I'm going to lift my presser foot. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to sew across just underneath the zipper stop over to where my other 3/8 of an inch markings are. When I get those, I'm going to lift my presser foot. I'm going to pivot, and then I'm going to stitch back up the other side of the zipper. When I get to the top, back stitch. Once you've sewn your zipper in, you should have 2 rows of stitching, and you should have stitched the bottom across underneath the zipper stop. So your 2 rows of stitching should be parallel to each other, and they should be equal distance from your original seam. Once you've stitched your zipper, now you want to flip it over and make sure that the stitching that you did actually is within the zipper tape of the zipper. So this row of stitching was my original stitching that I did to hold the zipper in place while we were getting ready to put it in. It went through the seam allowance only. Then I have a row of stitching here that is going through the zipper tape, and a row of stitching here that is going through the zipper tape. That is actually the stitching that you can see on the front of the garment. Now that we have it sewn, the last thing that we need to do is we need to actually open this seam back up so that we can actually open and close the zipper. So you'll take your seam ripper and just very carefully come in and pick those basting stitches out so that you open up the zipper. So you can take a little bit, go underneath the stitch, rip it, and then you can kind of pull on the fabric a little bit to actually pull that stitching out. And you're going to go all the way down, removing the basting stitch until you get to the bottom of the zipper where you sewed across underneath the zipper stop. You can cut off any of those threads that are just in there that you don't want anymore from where you've opened the seam up. And now once you've opened the seam, you should be able to open and close your zipper. Now with the 3/8 of an inch, we have a pretty wide amount of zipper tape that is showing. You can, if you prefer, you can sew these stitches closer so that you have a tighter stitch against your zipper tape and your zipper teeth. Just remember that you don't want to stitch over your zipper teeth, and you want to leave enough room so that your zipper pull and slider can actually slide up and down the teeth.